is to basically heal the galactic trauma of our entire galaxy, all these beings. There's been so much, as I said before, trauma, karma, and drama that has occurred.
When we look at the cycles, what is your timeline on when this becomes a global, species-wide phenomenon?
If we're in this cycle and that we created the cycle for ourselves, the devolution process is no better than the evolution process. We created it for ourselves. In my opinion, in this world of amnesia, the best way to understand and know what you truly want and what you truly want to achieve in your life is by experiencing the polar opposite.
What is the contrast between that and an age of energy and sovereignty?
At the end of this age, which we have hundreds and hundreds of years left, is we become the masters of our own quantum field.
Neil Gaur, welcome on Just Tap In, brother. What are you most excited about right now globally and in your life?
You know, in my life, well, I'll start globally. Globally, I'm really excited about, there's a lot of things going on in the last couple of weeks with UFO disclosure, and the needle has been pushed a little further. Some deep disclosures have happened in the last couple of weeks that has happened on the congressional level, when, you know, some congressional members coming out, another push, more information, more declassified documents that are coming out that are really blowing the lid on things. I'm also excited about things, honestly, the deep atrocities being exposed. I'm excited about what happened with the Epstein files, and I know people are on both sides with that, but I'm excited about the fact that things are being shown to society for us to deal with, right? I'll just speak on that for a second, that I feel what needs to happen right now is a collective spring cleaning, where we need to expose the underbelly of humanity and then all deal with it, maybe go through some anger, maybe go through some shock, and then get to a point of reconciliation and harmony and move forward from a lot of things. We can't just sugarcoat the past and sugarcoat what's happened and just create a new world. So when it comes to disclosure, when it comes to deep atrocities coming out, you know, I'm excited about what's going to happen next. And for myself, I feel like I'm in an evolution right now, expansion, and it's been a constant evolution for quite some time. But right now, with taking on the Expo, also, you know, our good friend, mutual friend Themia taking on Inspire 3, and then myself being a part of an Inspire 3 team, and now having the ability to really, you know, we can have a conversation on that later if you want, but really start communicating with people that are into deep meditation and NLP, and then introducing deeper esoterics to people that are maybe on the first level of consciousness. You know, I'm excited to be that bridge to take people into the deeper awareness of what's going on in the universe, Earth.
Beautiful. I love that notion of bridging. And I feel like, you know, even with this conversation, the conversations we have, it's an intergenerational bridge. You know, no longer the conversation is closed to a certain sect of people. This is across all generations. And I know you've been researching, studying, being in the weeds of things in the consciousness space for such a long time. With everything you've been taught about the human story, everything around our purpose here on the planet, what if we were to say that story has been deliberately inverted?
Yeah.
Where would you begin to start unraveling what you've discovered around that?
Yeah, there's so many entry points to that. Like, I would say, like, one, for example, is evolution. You know, I would say, let's start with the beginning. In the beginning was the word. You know, let's start with the singularity. And when we came down to this planet, let's start from the beginning again. So the singularity became duality, right? The infinite oneness became duality, and the duality eventually became darkness and light. The darkness and light slowly descended into lower and lower dimensions, creating other realities. In my opinion, the darkness and light then became masculine and feminine, then manifested in this world, and then we eventually ended up into the lowest of dimensions in a world, what I call a world of extremist, where we are on one side or we are on the other side, and we overcorrect from one side by going all the way to the other extreme, whereas the truth almost always lies somewhere in between. And so when it comes to something like evolution for the story of humanity, there's two trains of thoughts. There's evolution, which is everything evolved from natural selection, right? And there's a reason why I still call it theory, right? Because there's some things that haven't been proven in there. And then there is creationism, which, as you know, a lot of fundamental Christians and other devout religious people believe that humanity is only here for around 6,000 years and that dinosaurs didn't exist, the other side of creationism. And when you look at two extremes, it's almost impossible for you to see any similarities or any connection with the other side because you're all the way on this side. Now, when it comes to evolution, my research has shown that it's actually a combination of two. That humanity, there is definitely evolution on the planet. There is natural selection. There is beings that we observe evolving. But there's two anomalies within evolution. One is that blossoming plants, right, flowers that blossom and then let go of their seed and then mate with other plants, seem to have happened overnight. We have no fossil record from non-blossoming plants to blossoming plants. So what is that? That's a quantum leap in evolution for plant life on Earth. And the other one, a little more closer to home, is that humans went from one species to another species overnight. And there was definitely an evolution occurring, but then we became another species entirely. And what's the evidence for that? The evidence is that there's never been any transitionary fossils to show the evolution from humanity from one being to another. And ever since Darwinism came out with this theory, that he said that this is even a theory and this might change later, we've been constantly looking around the planet to find what was the transitionary phase from one being to another. And all we can see is that around 200 to 300,000 years ago, there was a quantum leap in humanity from one being to another. So back to your question, like what is one of the biggest misconceptions of our past is that it seems that there was some sort of divine intervention or some sort of seeding, genetic hybridization, something that occurred on the planet that shifted our, the species that we used to be into the species that we are now, that now has, this sentient awareness and we've become self-aware. Maybe we weren't at that level of consciousness before that happened.
And one thing that's really interesting when we look at the broader perspective, you really talk a lot about this 26,000, 25,000 year cycle. And, even especially starting from last year, there was so much information that came out about where we land ourselves in this cycle and what it actually means to our evolution as, a conscious species on this planet. What would you like to uncover there around where we land in this cycle right now?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things. So it seems that we've been going through 25, it's called the Great Year, 25,000 to 26,000 year cycle, which is synchronistically the precession with the zodiacs, the equinoxes, is also 26,000 years. And the distance of Earth to the black hole in the center of the galaxy is the same amount of years. So this number just repeats often. And my question really has been for a long time is how many cycles has there been, right? Has there only been a couple of cycles? Have there been infinite cycles for millions of years going on? And within these cycles, there's an evolution and devolution of consciousness. When I first got into all this awareness, back in 2001 and started understanding that there was a chance that there were more advanced species on Earth that, existed, I used to think that it was technological based, that they had more advanced technology, Atlantis and so on and so forth. And then I realized that it's actually an evolution of consciousness, is a consciousness based awareness, that it's not so technological. So what happens within this cycle is that we have an evolution of consciousness and a devolution of consciousness. And when we evolve, we get some sort of remembrance and connection to who we are and what we're doing on this planet. And when we devolve, we go through an amnesia process. And it seems, so the reason why I'm giving this kind of backstory here is if we're in this cycle and that we created this cycle for ourselves, the devolution process is no better than the evolution process. We created it for ourselves. In my opinion, in this world of amnesia, the best way to understand and know what you truly want and what you truly want to achieve in your life is by experiencing the polar opposite. So when we have forgetfulness, the only way to understand the light is going through the darkness. And that's what's been happening for the last 13,000 years. We fell from grace, so to speak, from the last golden age, around 13,000 years ago, the same time the Sphinx was in use based on geological studies from rubber shock. Then we began devolving and losing our innate abilities, losing our awareness and understanding of who we are. And now we're right at the bottom of the 13,000 year cycle, on the upturn, going back up again. The cycle, the ages that we've been in, is called the Kali Yuga, the Dark Ages. People probably heard of this age before. And the Kali Yuga has multiple themes: hierarchy, authority, and delusion. Right? And I don't really probably need to explain it too much, because hierarchy and authority, we give up power to authority. There's a hierarchical stance. There's government is hierarchical than us. There's police figures. There's authority, creating this institutionalized system where we give up our power to those that say that they're in control of us. And then delusion, what's right is wrong, what's wrong is right. Right? That's where we've been. And now we're in the mass corrective phase, where we're moving from what's called the Kali Yuga to the Dwapara Yuga. And the Dwapara Yuga is also known as the Bronze Age. And the theme of the Dwapara Yuga is the age of sovereignty and energy, right? So in sovereignty, in the age of the Kali Yuga, what did we used to call the kings? We used to call them the sovereign, right? As if they were our sovereign. Now we're moving into an age of sovereignty, where we realize our own divinity, our own sovereignty, our own independence. And then we're moving into the age of energy, where it begins with electricity, it goes into quantum physics, and by the end of this age, we realize we are energy, and we start mastering our own body. So just by looking at these calendars and looking at hundreds of civilizations that speak about these cycles, you can kind of gauge where we are at. The one civilization that actually has the dates is ancient India. India actually has the dates on when we shift from these cycles. So what they say is in 1700, we shifted from the Kali Yuga into a 200-year phase, in the 200-year transitionary phase, eventually leading us into the Dwapara Yuga. So it's been around 50 years or so since we manifested into this new age. And in this new age, not only do we have these new themes, but also we shift the way we think of aging. Time shifts. And eventually, our lifespan will also double as well.
I know you are very familiar with Bibhu Dev Misra's work around the Yuga cycles. And, he does have some, in a way, scary predictions around this transition period that we're in. I wanted to know how you've integrated that, in the sense of, we can even lay some of those out, what it means, how you've seen it from perhaps your own perspective. And because we're seeing a lot collapse around us, a lot coming back to the surface.
Yeah.
How do you swallow that in that sense?
Well, the scary part has already happened. World War I was a part of the age. World War II was a part of the age. What's going on right now with wars has already happened. So what you've noticed by the Yuga cycles is actually there's a lot of wars and upheaval during these times. And sometimes it can be harmonious in certain areas, but it's really perspective. Like, even though there's been craziness over the last 100 years, you and I are living pretty comfortably, right? And we're fine. There are people that aren't going to be fine. And then when it gets to a point where certain institutions collapse, when the financial system doesn't operate the way it is anymore, where jobs are now obsolete, when AI comes and takes over certain things, it's all perspective. How much have you identified with your bank account? How much have you identified with the old paradigm and the old systems? And then when those things start crumbling, those that have identified so deeply, they can go through depression, they can go through suicidal thoughts, all these things. But those that are expecting and ready for the new age, not so much. Another great thing that happened was during COVID. So all these things have happened and are happening, right? During COVID, how many people had to have a reflection on what they are without their job? Everybody was put on the same level, right? And some people didn't know what to do with themselves because they identified with what they thought they were, right? So to answer your question once again now, is that I don't think that we're in store for anything crazier. I think that it's been happening. It's been pretty crazy. And for some people, they have experienced hardships. They have experienced atrocities. They've experienced crimes, including, it's all relative, really. Like, imagine how many people have gone into the prison industrial system for crimes that they shouldn't have gone in for. Imagine how terrible their lives are, right? So it's relative to the person. It doesn't have to be collective. But then I also bring in the Hopi prophecy, which is the fifth world, right? So when you look at these other ancient civilizations, they say that Earth has been destroyed by 4 different elements: earth, wind, fire, water. And now we're in the fifth element destruction phase. But the lucky thing for us, Ether is not destructive. It doesn't kill to reform. It transforms while you're alive. But the vibration of the ether is such a high vibration that all the impurities within yourself need to come out to be cleansed for you to adopt the new world. You know? So an analogy I have that I love to share a lot is, if we're going to the fifth dimension, which I believe is, like, I can scientifically get into that. If we're going into a fifth dimensional state of consciousness, technically you need to go through a wormhole to go to another dimension, right? Like, scientifically, you would have to go through some sort of singularity to get there. So imagine the singularity of a wormhole, the event horizon, and humanity has been on the outskirts of the event horizon for thousands of years, going around slowly and slowly getting to the singularity. When they get to the singularity and go in the wormhole, they get into the new dimension, new reality. But all the things that took lifetimes to experience, we're now experiencing 20 times a day, right? Lesson. Are you going to learn the lesson? Are you going to learn the lesson? And the only way we can go through the wormhole is if we let go of all the baggage that is holding us into this reality. So the reason why we're spinning around so fast and we're having all these repeat lessons over and over is because the only way we can go through the wormhole is to leave the baggage in this past dimension. So we're having opportunities every single day in order to do so. And in many people, these atrocities are coming up as anxiety, depression, feeling disconnected, not fitting in, right? All the things that are coming up for you that you've experienced in your life. And also, I feel that each human is not just operating on their own karmic loop, which is their own past incarnations. I feel every human on Earth is a representative for a whole galactic community. You know, I jokingly say that we are like one big galactic mental hospital. We're processing karma, drama, and trauma for the whole galaxy. You know, it's no easy feat. Yeah.
Hello, beautiful family. Quick one today. I just wanted to take a moment to thank each and every one of you that have subscribed to this channel. Your subscription means more than you know. Even though it's free, what you're doing is you're empowering a whole channel to be able to do this every single day and continue showing up in the way that we can with all of our resources on hand. Thank you for contributing to the growth of this channel, for sharing it with the people that you love, for creating a conscious movement of individuals that are seeking the sovereignty and the divinity of their soul. This is why we're here. And if you haven't already and you're enjoying this content, I invite you now to look below on that little button that says subscribe and welcome you properly to this community. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being who you are and being pure love and radiating that with everyone that you see. Back to the episode. There's a moment in your life where you had, I think, around 20 hours of QHHT past life regression, specifically around the constellation Orion. You discovered that you were a Stargate keeper back in those times, and that has actually influenced a lot of the work that you do today. If you were to take us back to Orion, which is like the birthing place of a lot of our history, what would you like to clarify around that story and what you actually experienced in your regressions?
Yeah, you know, I've put on a lot of events on like the Palladian Conference, Starseed Summits. I've put on like 10 Starseed Summits. I've done Arcturian events. I've done Sirius events. And then I did this Orion Conference around a year ago because I felt like the need to because of this regression. And you've probably even seen Arcturian courses, Sirian courses, channeling. But if you could like list off right now every Orion course that you've seen, every Orion summit you've seen, every Orion channeler you've seen, you probably have few or far between, or maybe zero for most people. And there's a reason for that. Many Orion starseeds, they feel kind of disconnected and isolated from my experience with them. And you don't really talk about Orion starseeds. People normally talk about the Orion trauma. So the first thing I would like to speak about is how time works. That Orion did go through some wars that lasted for a long time. I don't know the exact amount of time it lasted, but it's been millions of Earth years since the Orion wars have ended. Orion at this point is in harmony and in peace. There's definitely some isolation planets in Orion where they don't really interact or trade with other planets, even though they know about their existence, because they keep to themselves, because even though much time has passed, they just created this whole isolation mentality. And then there's definitely civilizations that basically trade with themselves. But why are we on Earth, and why are so many people parroting their traumas from Orion? Because this time is such a beautiful, important time. As I shared that wormhole singularity analogy, that it's giving everybody the opportunity to deal with a lot of traumas that have occurred through the galaxy. So a lot of souls that experienced the Orion Wars millions of years ago, they incarnated right into this lifetime. Right into this lifetime. So for them, the Orion Wars were yesterday. They just came from it. But from Orion in linear space-time, which you can't really even say is linear, but in the trajectory of space-time, they've transcended that. So that's the first thing, is why are people still speaking about on Earth if Orion is in peace? It's because we jumped timelines, we skipped millions of years to come here. And now the other component would be that the largest Stargate in our galaxy is in Orion. There's Stargates throughout the galaxy. There's Stargates that help you jump from planet to planet. There's a couple of Stargates that help you go to different galaxies. But Orion had the portal worlds where there were a lot of Stargates. And these Stargates during the Orion Wars were hijacked and taken over. And, the reptilian races actually went through them and escaped to Earth. And when they did that, they took something called the Crater God technology. The Crater God technology, imagine it like a terraforming device. Something you can put into the soil of a dead planet, and it will just like terraform the whole planet. Waters, rivers, waterfalls, lakes, animal life, all that stuff. It will seed it. Kind of very similar to Prometheus, as I'm thinking of it in the movie Prometheus, where he decompresses and he decomposes, and then all of a sudden life comes from it. So as they left through the Stargate and came to Earth, that the Stargates in Orion shut down, and for a long time, Stargate rooms were created in order to simulate what was happening through the natural Stargates in Orion. And these Stargates and the beings that had come to Earth actually manifested and came to Earth about 65 million years ago, or 100 million years ago actually, and had an effect on basically shifting the Earth's consciousness over the last 100 million years, so they were able to incarnate on it. Now, their original intent was what we could call a malintent or malicious, because they were trying to control and they were actually warring against the people in Orion. But what they did was they slowly but surely shifted the genetics on Earth, so Earth's frequency could hold sentient beings such as you and I that can exist on the planet now. So even though they kind of were what we would call the bad guys, even though that's a whole other story. I don't believe there is any bad guy. But when they came to Earth, what their actual consequence of what they did was increase the consciousness of the planet, so sentient beings that are master beings can now incarnate here. So, the story can go deeper and deeper, and if you have any more probing questions, we can get deeper into it.
Are these what we would call the founder race?
The ones that came down here, the reptilians, is that what you're referring to? No, so the founder race, they are the non-personified beings that were from this black hole in the center of our galaxy. The founder race were, some people call them the Elohim, but I don't really use that term now, because Elohim is not really a race of beings. It's actually a blanket statement that represents multiple beings. Basically, like, Elohim refers to crater god being, crater extraterrestrial, let's say. And there's been crater extraterrestrials ever since the beginning of humans in this galaxy, including the reptilians. So when people say the Elohim, that's not the same Elohim that happened millions of years later that then happened in our system, including the Anunnaki, including the Bible Elohim, which is a different set of beings. So the founder race, they're from the center of a galaxy. And what seems to occur is when any group of energy becomes sentient, becomes aware of being aware. That's what sentience is to me. There's awareness, but there's an aware of being aware. When you can reflect on your own awareness, the original spark of source then ignites in them. And the original spark of source is, I want to create in my image. We were creating the image of. So these beings decided to incarnate into Lyra and create the first humanoid feline beings. Those were technically the founder race, but then the Lyrans were the first humanoid template that all humanoids then became from our entire galaxy. These reptilian beings that were in Orion, they had ancestry even more ancient than us, because when the Lyrans incarnated into the Lyran system, our whole galaxy was insectoid and reptilians. So, but when we came in, the humans were master geneticists. We were the most like advanced geneticists out of anyone. It was like we couldn't help but just do laboratory experiments with every type of being on every planet. Hybridization. And as we were doing that, we violated a lot of free will. We took a lot of DNA, and we weren't aware sometimes how souls are connected to the DNA. So we started interfering with the incarnational cycle of reptilian beings on specific planets that they had, including dragon beings, right? If you're following me. And that was the original battle. The original disconnect between reptilians and humans was the genetic hybridization and the disagreement on DNA. So I call the DNA, the Orion Wars, the DNA Wars, right? Because that's where it all stemmed from. However, millions of eons passed, right? And no one remembered why they were fighting anymore. It wasn't even really about the original blueprint, the original trauma. It just became the other, that this is just what we know, that we don't agree with these beings because they're not like us. They have, we are the first ones in this galaxy, as opposed to they're the ones that came later and inhabited this planet. So that's kind of a simplified story of what happened in Orion.
And I'm sure that, if we look at the timelines in linear time, this all happened millions of years ago.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you see those stories, those original traumas playing out right now at the world stage. If we go into these institutions that are collapsing, shattering, how do you see that playing out in the current world that we're in right now?
So the entire what Earth is designed for is to basically heal the galactic trauma of our entire galaxy, all these beings. There's been so much, as I said before, trauma, karma, and drama that has occurred, right? Definitely there's been times of peace, but there's been a lot that has occurred between them. And another analogy I like to use, like in movies like Trojan War and different movies like that, how there's about to be a war and there's like 200,000 people on one side, 200,000 people on another side, and then the generals go in the front and they say, hey, how about we have our best fight each other, and if one person wins, then that you win the whole war, and we save bloodshed. We are that one person. The final frontier is not outside there. The final frontier is Earth. This is the battleground that we think is a battle, but it's really not. It's a cosmic dance, a Shiva Shakti dance that's going on this planet. It's for us to heal that trauma. And not only even racism on the planet, the other, wars that are occurring, what's happening with Iran, Israel, and all these people based on religion and ethnic background is completely connected to the division between races within the galaxy. Because every human has a different connection, a different hybridization of extraterrestrial races that are from different ET groups. And now it's manifested in religions, it's manifested in languages that are extraterrestrial informed, is manifested in ethnic groups. And so what we've done is we've taken what was galactic speciesism or galactic racism, and we've brought it down to Earth. And now we're putting it on each other through othering every single person, right? Othering a lot of countries and people. And the way this reality works is it's pretty much operates like a simulation, like a hologram, like a computer program. And there's this one program, imagine this hard drive that has this one program in it, and all the programs are corrupted outside the hard drive. And then this one program in there has this game inside of it where those beings need to learn how to live in harmony with each other. And when they do, the DNA is connected to all the strings within the simulation, where we then usher in peace in the universe. So that's why all these beings have donated DNA to Earth. I call us the Library of Alexander for of DNA of the galaxy. I wouldn't doubt if every being has donated DNA to the Earth experience in our galaxy, because if you really look at different planets, in many planets there's only one or two races. There's not too many planets with so many species. Go to Vietnam and stumble into a cave somewhere that's been isolated for 100 years, and you're going to find 2,000 species that you never even knew existed, right? That's not how it is throughout the universe. This Earth experience gives you that opportunity. All these beings are donated. There's cockroach type beings, there's ant type beings, there's human type beings, there's horse type
mantis
beings. There's mantis, right?
Lions.
Yeah. So as we heal our differences on Earth through what's going on right now, we then start permeating that through the universe, and we heal the karma and the trauma that we've created throughout our galaxy. And I feel that is probably one of the main reasons that we're here on this planet.
Yeah, that really connects a lot of dots, brother, because, you know, that makes sense a lot to me, where these beings from around the universe have donated their DNA to create essentially who we are, to see how they can resolve their traumas, their karmas. Would that mean that these beings that have donated, are they watching this experiment play out? And in what ways can they get involved?
Yeah.
Or are they just meant to observe?
It's a bit of both. You know, you probably maybe have heard of quarantine, that there was a time that there was a quarantine on Earth in order for us to be supposedly disconnected, but disconnected from actual interaction, because the consciousness of humanity was at a low state that we would act out in fear, we would act out in war, and in some ways our systems and institutions are still like that. So there was that, but then etherically, energetically, they've always been supporting us. I'll give an example. In the last 50 years, how many times the nuclear warheads in different countries have been scrambled when people on Earth have tried to actually usher in nuclear war. That's one thing, and that's proven through CIA and declassified documents, how all of a sudden there's a UFO and now the nuclear warheads, everybody's locked out of it, right? There's been oil spillages that should have killed all the wildlife and ruined the ecosystem, and then just like that, everything is cleaned up, right? That's another way. So they're supporting us in not destroying ourselves. So it's almost like a parent allowing you to have your experience, but making sure you don't put your hand in the fire, you know, and or jump off the cliff, right? Or run into traffic. That's how they've been helping us. Now, humanity's consciousness for many people on the Earth are super ready for this contact, but we're in such a dualistic phase. There's people that are super not ready, and there are some that are. So we're getting to a point now where we can have open contact, which is why there's people actually having interactions, which is why, like in Peru, for example, in the Amazon jungle, there's people like Sixto Pax Wells, and there's other ones that are doing contact groups down there and, you know, communicating with them. So we're getting to a point that it's going to be open contact very soon. But the first thing that needs to happen is everybody is going to know that we're not alone in the universe. Everyone is going to have just an awareness that it's now been said that we're not alone, right? And then as soon as our consciousness shifts to be open to that, that's when we start opening ourselves up to interactions with these beings. And I would say that some people might think, oh my God, it's so far away from this to happen. But if you look at what's happening through Congress, through declassified documents, UFO crash retrievals, read and see what they're talking about. They're already interacting. There's maybe not too far away from any person, there's some underground base with a UFO that's been reverse engineered, or maybe even the body of an extraterrestrial, or an interaction, a communication with ETs. There's two worlds going on simultaneously right now, right? There's this world that we know it, and there's this whole world of galactic communication, like a Men in Black world happening. What needs to happen is these worlds need to merge and need to be disclosed, not just for the upliftment and the truth of humanity, so we can understand what we are. We don't have to see people as the other. We can know what God is. We can know what religion really represents, but also because so many crimes against humanity are being committed in order to hold these secrets, right? Like the amount of people that have been killed to hold these secrets and, you know, and hide them, right? It's just getting to a point now that humanity is ready for this. And when we do understand that we're not alone in the universe, the next step is going to be understanding our connection to them ancestrally, and what dimensions means, what spirituality is, what vibration is, right? It's going to be a huge existential crisis for a lot of people on Earth.
What are the biggest secrets that are still being kept?
Damn, dude. Okay. Biggest secrets that have... well, definitely the ET UFO thing, right? Even though it is coming out now, I would say ancient civilizations. I know you're into that as well, and then you've gone to Egypt as well. And one of the greatest secrets that's being kept is how advanced our ancient ancestors were. They would keep being told and gaslit to be like, you guys are crazy for thinking they use some advanced technology for this, right? For the pyramids in Egypt, for the structures in Peru that you can't even put a hair inside of, for the caves in Malta that are 110 hertz frequency, that unless you're thinking multidimensionally and you knew exactly how to make them look after you were done with it, there's no way you could have even created that, but out of just rock, right? And so I would say our ancient civilizations and our connections to our past. And now, in regards to the two places in the world where the biggest secrets are being hidden, that hopefully soon we're going to be seeing some evidence of, would be one, the Sahara Desert, and two, the Amazon. And with the Sahara Desert, the reason why a lot of mainstream people that are following the mainstream don't look into the Sahara is because we know scientifically now and through the mainstream that the Sahara Desert was a vast oasis about 13,000 years ago during the end of the last ice age. And the reason for that is because all the north was covered in ice, all the south was covered in ice, the equator was the place to live. But the mainstream people don't look there because 13,000 years ago, we were primitive, right? Why looking somewhere where there's not going to be any great structures? But then those that are in the know, in secret organizations, governments, shadow governments, they're using LiDAR technology and clocking all this information. Under the sands of Sahara, Egypt was not just in Egypt. It was the whole of North Africa. Okay? Mm-hmm. And it goes back even further. And if you track the migration from Atlantis through North Africa, they went through Morocco. I did a whole presentation called From Atlantis to Morocco, evidence of Atlantis in Morocco, right? And all the different symbolism and what's going on there and the stories and the mythology in that area. So the Sahara Desert is going to be one of the biggest smoking guns when we start releasing the LiDAR information. Soon, LiDAR technology is going to be inexpensive enough for a person like you and me to buy a LiDAR machine and go LiDAR some area. But a couple of the countries that have the Sahara Desert are very stringent dictatorship type countries. So you can't even go in there. You can't fly anything above it, you know? Egypt, of course, a lot of countries that are deeply religious, they're gatekeepers to this information, right? And now going to Amazon, the Amazon rainforest was not a rainforest 13,000 years ago. It was like a massive civilization. Did you know that the Amazon was actually man-made? It was basically a farm. It's a pharmacy and the biggest food bank on Earth. Everything is. It was deliberately
all the medicines.
Yeah, medicines and food, right? In an environment that you don't think that would normally be created, right? And 13,000 years ago, the largest rainforest on Earth was the Sahara Desert. The Amazon was more like the Sahara back then. It was more open and vast. And now it's switched. So in the Amazon, we're going to find and continue to find, and they are finding now, vast structures of ancient civilizations as well. Then the last one I'll add to that is Peru. Peru, I think, is underrated. People don't give it enough credit for what happened down there. But it seems like Peru has been the most occupied place on planet consistently for thousands and thousands of years, even before the story of the Alaskan land bridge and the natives coming over the Alaskan land bridge that connected Russia and Antarctica. We have DNA evidence that these people in Peru, the Paracas people and the Nazca people, were there for thousands of years before, and their DNA connects to Mesopotamia in the same time when the stories of the Anunnaki were written by the Sumerians in Mesopotamia. And it seems from what has been found, these people had elongated skulls, right? I mean, this is
I've seen them in
right
Peru.
there. You know,
I've seen
elongated
the skulls.
skulls, red hair, right, which is a genetic anomaly, and they have two suture lines on this skull, not one, which we have one, and they have two holes in the back of their in skull, which looks like they had like maybe some sort of vein system for blood supply to go to the back of the skull, a genetic anomaly, right? But because there's cranial deformation, regular cranial deformation, everybody just goes, you know, who wants to discredit it says, oh, it's cranial deformation. But it seems like there was the elongated skull people, somehow they died off. And then humans afterwards started trying to mimic them and, you know, doing cranial deformation to try to make the skulls look similar to those beings that they maybe used to worship.
I would love to touch on the notion that a person doesn't have to spend years of research and reading books to know, or let's say remember, this information. I know you've had multiple Vipassana experiences where something inside you started to awaken inside your DNA that allowed you to access these memories, these remembrances. And if you could lay out that process that is actually happening worldwide, not just in the few people, what could you say about this remembrance stage that we're in for humanity?
Yeah, you know, what happens during Vipassana, what also happens during plant medicine ceremonies or deep, consistent meditation is that you start having a remembrance. And I like to go into the science of it, is that just like, so I'll explain what happens in Vipassana. So in Vipassana, the men and women are separated. You're meditating about 6-7 hours a day. You have some breaks for lunch and so on and so forth. But they take away all stimuli from you. You don't have any phone or anything like that. You're pretty much you're not even cooking your own food. You're not even washing your own dishes. The only thing you do every day is meditate, rinse your dish, shower. Okay. And what happens is, after a few days, your conscious mind, the frontal cortex, that is so focused on all the things in life that you need to basically do, whether you got to cook food, talk to someone, answer the phone, work, all of a sudden realizes, oh, I'm not needed right now. Let me take a back seat. Let me chill out. And when you do that, your subconscious mind plugs right into your conscious mind. And all these thoughts and memories start bleeding through. All these, and I remember it so much of my life because I don't have too many distinct memories from before like 20. Like I don't have too much. And so for me, it was very healing because remembering. At some points I would close my eyes and I would see an HD quality screen of memories that I forgot, right? It was insane. And so what the Buddha did, because this is Buddha's original technique, I started realizing, oh my God, this guy was a scientist. He found the science of the mind. What happens is you begin processing all the things in your subconscious, right? Happy, good, bad, and ugly. And you look at it and you feel it with neutrality, divine neutrality. You don't put a craving towards beautiful experiences. You don't create an aversion towards negative experiences. You just experience it as a sensation. And then once you do that, all of a sudden, you start tapping into past lives, past incarnations, interdimensional incarnations, extraterrestrial incarnations. So if you know the story of Buddha, what he did was he basically meditated under the Bodhi tree for a long, long time until he cleared all of his nirvana and achieved enlightenment. So the story of Buddha is the nirvana and the enlightenment that he achieved was he did this Vipassana technique, cleared out his subconscious mind from all this life. And then as soon as that was cleared out, his mind started taking him to past lives, which is why he literally wrote a book on his past lives, the lives that he went to. And then you start clearing out and remembering all basically your interdimensional self. So that's kind of giving you the microcosm of what's happening on the macro right now on Earth, is that's an individual way to do it. But as we go and up in this upturn of consciousness, what I'd like to say is the veils become thinner. The ability to achieve this level is quicker and faster and stronger than before. My mom used to say to me when I would say like, hey, why did Krishna talk to Arjuna? Why did Rama, I was raised Hindu, why did Rama, a god, be able to communicate? How did Vishnu communicate with this person? She said there was a time where people could speak to the gods. The veils are thin. And then in the Mahabharata itself, Arjuna talks to Krishna and says, be aware There will be a time when Dharma gets lost from the planet and people can no longer speak to the gods, but it will come back. Okay? And that's what happened. But it was meant to be. There was a time we forgot. Now the veils are thinner. And with the energetics that's happening, with the position of our solar system and our galaxy, with Earth moving through the photon belt, which is the milk of the Milky Way galaxy, the very high concentration of ether, the vibrations are ripe for us to start remembering. So that's why I feel people are having spontaneous awakenings right now, Kundalini awakenings, going in meditation, connecting with the extraterrestrial selves. You know, for me, it's been my dragon selves, my Orion self. All these different parts of who and what I am are coming back into this reality, and where it's almost like a collective soul retrieval, where we're retrieving fragments of ourselves so that we can bring more of our wholeness into this earthly experience.
You mentioned speaking to the gods. Who are we really speaking to?
Yeah. When I say gods, I mean it with a lowercase g. You know, because oh man, that goes into, so that's a deep one. So sometimes I wonder how many fragments and how many fractals are we from the original source? Is every galaxy its own heaven, its own universe, right? Every black hole in the center of its galaxy is its own godhead. Is there a reason why all the ancients called the black hole in the center of the galaxy the central sun? You probably heard the word central sun. I even have the central sun right here, right? The black hole in the center of the galaxy. A lot of people thought when they said the central sun, they meant the sun here in our solar system. But they meant God is in the central sun. There's even a book called The Seed of the Soul. The Seed of the Soul is talking about the black hole in the center of the galaxy. That is our Godhead. That is the father of this creation. Even though we have our Zeus sun, right, soul over here, and Yeshua's God, which is the sun, which is a representation of linear time, we then have the grandson, the central sun, which is a black hole in the center of the galaxy. Then we have our galaxies rotating around another central sun. Then that goes into another one that gets our universe rotating around something else. And that could even go out even further and further and further. So how many fragments are we? How many fractals are we from the original initial spark? And a lot of people, you know, saying they're talking directly to source. I take that with a grain of salt, because I feel the way the systems and the constructs are created is that there are certain beings and entities that claim to be source, that are literally the source and the overseer or the supervisor of this experiment. So we might have one source, one God. It might be Archangel Michael, it might be what we call as God, that is the source head of this collective experience. But then there's another source head that they're just one fragment below. Are you following what I'm saying here? Right? So this is like, I don't have answers. I have questions, you know? And so back to your original question, if you don't mind sharing it one more time so I can get back on track here.
Who are the gods that we speak to?
Yes. Okay, so now when I say gods in lowercase g is because all these beings, including the Godhead that might be one fractal of them, are just a being that has another perspective and a higher perspective than us, because they're privy to more information because of the dimension that they're within. In every dimension is a data set of information. The third dimension has rules and regulations to abide by and a specific bandwidth of data that we can achieve. When you go into higher dimensions, you're now privy to more awareness. Oh, galactic awareness, what sources, you know, what multiverses are. So the gods that we speak to are other beings that exist in vibratory states where they are privy to more information than we are within this dimensional bandwidth. Okay? And so they're not better than us, but they have more awareness and information because of their perspective. So somebody might say, well, then technically they are better than us. That is kind of a god. But I would say that we have been those beings. because a lot of those beings that are in these higher states then choose to come down and incarnate into lower states. So in many ways, not only are we speaking to beings that we've probably interacted with in those dimensions, but many times we're speaking to ourselves that exist into these higher dimensions. So these gods, there's no one explanation of who these gods are, but they're not better than us. They're just beings that have other perspectives that we have actually been a part of as well. And I'll just add one more thing to that. I think I don't think Earth is a punishment. I think Earth is a gift to the masters. So many of us have actually achieved the greatest of heights in this galaxy. Not only do we elect to be here, we're also selected to be here. We came down, the most advanced souls came down to have this earthly experience. We've achieved so many beautiful things in the universe, in the galaxy. We've gone into so many experiences. But what is it that Source wanted originally? To experience itself infinitely. Well, what do you experience when you've experienced infinitely? Let's wipe our memories clean. Let's create the lowest of dimensional planets. Let's go there and see if we can still remember the original spark of Source when we have everything set up against us to try to shut us down. And what we have achieved is, even though all this energy, the chemicals, the food, the government, the system, the density, the hardships, all these things trying to close us down, we still found the light.
Even what you were mentioning around the gods, David Grush in Congress, and you've said this before, that referred to these beings as interdimensional projections of higher consciousness. Man. That's insane, the way he described it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was mind-blowing when I heard that.
Yeah. Right. What does that mean to you?
So, it's a couple of things, because the first thing would be, when I was first got into this awareness, 2001, 2002, I heard about the Arcturians, so the first beings I heard about. And I was like, extraterrestrials. And then all of a sudden, about 5-6 years ago, people said, oh, they're not extraterrestrials, they're interdimensionals. And in my opinion, that's the same thing, because we're talking about Arcturians in 6-dimensional space. So they're extraterrestrials, but they're also interdimensional because they live in another dimension. And say that you live in our dimension, but you have a technology to travel interdimensionally so you can bend space-time and come to Earth. Technically, you're an extraterrestrial in our dimension, now traveling interdimensionally, right? So when he says projections of higher consciousness, that does two things for me. Simulation, a projection, a holographic projection from a higher realm of into this dimension, and then it also speaks about the higher dimensional beings, because a lot of these higher dimensional beings, they can't incarnate their full selves into this reality. Some of these beings are non-personified. They don't have physical bodies. Some of them are light beings living in ships, but they come down as physical beings. So when he says that, to me, it represents the holographic nature of the simulation, and it also represents higher dimensional beings coming down to the earthly plane.
I want to go back for just a moment around what we were talking with the cycles. The Dwarpa cycle, you actually call it the age of energy and sovereignty. I would love to explore what that age of energy and sovereignty begins to emerge as the Kali Yuga, you mentioned authority, hierarchy, and delusion. And so what is the contrast between that and an age of energy and sovereignty?
Yeah, so authority, hierarchy, delusion. What's wrong is right, what's right is wrong. The good example is how we're so focused on pharmaceuticals, and there was this movement away from what naturally cures us. That's like the epitome of it all, right? The demonization of spirituality, the demonization of the herbalist back in King James time around 1500, the 1500s, where there was the witch trials, and the witch trials were actually completely connected to herbalism. And it was those that were using plants and in order to cure illnesses. Those are the first people that were burnt at the stake. And you and I both have friends that probably have memories of being witches and burnt at the stake, right? So and then when you go against authority and you think there's another way to live, you put back in your place, right? And then the whole sovereignty thing, as I shared before, someone else is the sovereign, that you are not the sovereign, you are worshiping, you are just a mere peon. That is the energy of this, what we've been into for the last couple thousand years. If you look at the cycles of time, and you look at the times that we shifted, like 700 BCE, we could do a whole podcast just on 700 BCE, because the Kali Yuga started then. 700 BCE, there was a huge effort to move from polytheism to monotheism. 700 BCE is exactly when the ancient Israelites moved from a pagan religion to a monotheistic religion. It's exactly when they worshipped Ashtar from the Pleiades. They worshipped Baal. They had all these gods, and then Yahweh was the one. That was when Yahweh said, "You will choose no other powerful one over me." That's in the Old Testament. That's one of the commandments. You will worship no other one over me. Yahweh said it, 700 BCE. Same exact time we move into the Kali Yuga. Then we go into deep forgetfulness, and now we start emerging out. 200-year transitionary phase in between. So as we move out, upheaval, turmoil. But one of the number one things that happened in this age was the age of energy. And the age of energy first started out with something external. Electricity, light bulbs, 1700s, right? Light bulbs started being used all over the place. Just electricity, because we discovered energy. And then when 200 years later, right, it was 1700s, it was atheism when it comes to science, right? There was this whole movement towards moving God out of spirituality, out of energy. And it was linear sciences, it was Newtonian physics, right? All that stuff was on point for them back then. 200 years later, when the Kali Yuga ends, who is born? Max Planck. What does Max Planck discover? He rediscovers quantum physics. Yeah. We go from energy and the atom and the neutron to, we're made out of subatomic particles that are constantly vibrating. Everything is subatomic. The beginning of the quantum era begins right at the beginning of the Dwapara Yuga. Okay? The wars happened that were predicted as well. World War I, World War II, the same amount of time. Einstein comes about, all these theories come about, and now instead of having like Galileo and Newtonian that became very atheist, you start having the deeply spiritual scientists. Max Planck, Einstein, very spiritual. Consciousness became on the forefront. Well, if we're more than an atom, we're more than that, we're subatomic, where does consciousness come from? That was the conversation, right? And so the 1900s was the experimentation phase of like, oh yeah, we're all quantum beings. What does this mean for us? Now, at the end of the 1900s, beginning of the 2000s, we're in the application of the quantum, right? Oh, let's see what happens when we apply this into reality. A great example, quantum computing, right? Quantum computing is literally this way that I can simplify it is that it will take a second to do something that a regular computer will take a few thousand years to do, or maybe can never achieve in the lifespan of the universe. How can it do something in a second that will take a computer that? Because it entangles two quantum particles at different parts of the universe at the same rotation, where they have interdimensional communication with each other, which then hits every quantum particle in every dimension above it, using every quantum particle simultaneously to operate and process the answer to that question, instead of using one atom to do it, which is a regular computer, right? So what is it proving? It literally proves that we live in a quantum reality of parallel universes, and we're able to use parallel universes to compute stuff. So the application phase. The next phase is, oh my God, we are quantum beings. We're constantly vibrating. Everything around us is vibrating in this quantum. Even this blood bottle right here has a quantum frequency that is affecting my vibration. What does it mean? Well, there's frequencies around us everywhere. There's EMF frequencies, there's Wi-Fi frequencies, there's sound frequencies. Could it be that maybe some of the times we're not having a good time at life has to do with the way that we've constructed this world, with these frequencies that are constantly bombarding our subatomic world, maybe affecting us in a way that isn't for the betterment of ourselves and others, right? That is where we're at now. So what starts to happen is, when this becomes part of the mainstream, is we start changing the way we use radio signals, the way we use Wi-Fi routers, the way we use music. All these things start becoming more done intentionally. And all the things that were vibrating before that we stopped being intentional with, we start bringing intention back to. Great example is music, tuning it to 432 rather than the 440, things like that. So that's, I'm giving you step by step here. And then what happens after that, at the end of this age, which we have hundreds and hundreds of years left, is we become the masters of our own quantum field. And what happens when we're the masters of our quantum field? We get into the telepathy stage, we get into innate abilities and gifts, we get into levitation. We go from creators that are unconsciously moving in this world, and then we become the people that are behind the steering wheel of life. And now we begin to rewrite the code, because the quantum field is the code of the simulation. When we become the masters of the code of the simulation, we get to rewrite the code. And when we do that, I can't even begin to tell you what it will look like. We can only imagine what that world will look like.
What's your, let's say, timeline into this latter stage? Because, a lot of people already can do things such as levitation, telepathy. I was just in the Monroe Institute for a week. I saw people do extraordinary things, spoon bending, remote viewing, things of that nature. So what is, when we look at the cycles, what is your timeline on when this becomes a global species-wide phenomenon?
Right. One thing I've really enjoyed researching as I've been doing this is the civilizations that maintained the frequencies of higher ages. And it seems like at the end of every age, there's a constitution of society where there are people that want to hold on to the old age. And normally they leave the civilizational society they're in and they go start living together. So there's evidence throughout every age that there's beings and people that live that are at the consciousness of other ages. So right now, there's people that are already in this new age, as you just shared, that are at that level. What just happens is more and more people get there. There's always going to be those pioneers, and those pioneers are the teachers of the new age. A great example is Yeshua, Jesus. He came down right in the middle of the Kali Yuga, but he came down right in the middle, right when we were about to turn back up again. But we're still in the Kali Yuga, but we came to the right when we turned back up again. And he was able to do amazing things. And he was an avatar that had more fragments of his soul, that came down to earth with more of his wholeness because of his past experiences doing this work, and was then able to give us insight and wisdom on how we can achieve those things that we weren't ready for back then. But his information awareness now, the truth of him is coming out even more so, and we're able to utilize it. So, back to your question, that I think that there are definitely always going to be people in every single age that are already tapped into this awareness, and more people are going to be tapping to the abilities. A lot of people are still stuck in the old paradigm right now, but that old paradigm needs to crumble, and they need to know that no matter what happens, even if the old paradigm crumbles, they're still going to be okay. They're going to be safe. They're going to be held. They're going to have what they need: food, water, shelter. Something that I realized is that most people in the world want the same thing, if not everybody: community, shelter, love. And a lot of the fights, atrocities, crimes, wars that happen is the fear that the other side is going to take away what we want to keep for ourselves, what we want so badly. That person is going to take away our livelihood. That country is going to take the way we want to live. They want to convert us all to Islam, and they want us to be them. So we need to fight against them because they want to take away our sovereignty of us being ourselves, right? And so the beautiful thing within what I just shared there is that all that everybody's trying to do is they're like a little kid trying to protect themselves, because they think that the other person wants to take away the innate ability to survive, live, and have connection on this planet. If we realize that we all wanted the same thing, and that there are just a few people telling us that we don't, right? Oh my God, we'd have a revolution of consciousness. So many people have judgments and assumptions over whole collective groups of people, right? And most people, they just want to take care of their families. They just want to be able to eat. They want to survive. Even when it comes to racism, even in the U.S., right? The people that are like inherently racist, or were, the people that they're racist towards, they have a fear that they are going to take away what they believe is their ability to survive and work, right? So if we all get to an understanding that we're all in this together, that we're all humans then there's more than enough for everyone, right? Then we can shift away from that fear and that protective mentality and move more into a relaxed nervous system where we start feeling safe and secure with others rather than feeling that we're always in competition.
Beautiful, brother. And, I feel like we could keep going for the next 7 hours in this conversation. But we can just call this part 1,
Yes.
volume 1 of our conversations. And I know we're going to be doing a lot more beautiful things together. Before we have a section to finalize called the final trio, which are personalized questions to each guest. And before we get into that, I would love to give you the space to let us know a little bit more of what you have going on right now, where people can find you and the work that you're doing. This episode will air a little bit after we've lived the New Living Expo together. And so thank you for having me there. We're going to do I'm going to be hosting a few panels. You're going to be running the whole event. So what would you like to, where would you like to send people to find your work?
Yeah. So they can find my work at portaltoascension.org, and all my events are there. We do around 70 events a year, and online events and in person. And even though we have other websites, it all comes, you can connect to all of it at Portal to Ascension. I do that San Rafael event. It's going to be the first year, as you know, that I'm taking it over. And then I also do a conference every year in Glastonbury, England, ascensionglastonbury.com, which is one of my favorite events because it's a grid working event. It's a conference. It's a retreat. It's, beautiful experience there, ascensionglastonbury.com. But if everybody wants to be connected to what we're doing, just sign up to our newsletter, and we'll be sending out updates on everything that's happening. And ultimately, I feel that right now we're in a phase where humanity is expanding to a whole other level of experience, and there's going to be a lot of things, a lot of systems, a lot of institutions crumbling, and truly just us coming together in unity and realizing that on the other side of all this is transparency, truth, wisdom, and prosperity. There's a better way to live on Earth that works for everybody, right? This world has existed for so long based on lack mentality and only the chosen few having the ability to basically have dominion over others. But we don't need to live like that. There's a way for all of us to live in abundance, prosperity, and truth and wisdom. And that's why we do this work. So I'm just excited to see what's going to happen in the next few years, because I feel we're in for an amazing ride. There's going to be a lot of changes. I don't think we're going to recognize the Earth in 3 years, man. It's going to be a huge shift.
Also, there's rich history behind the New Living Expo, and then also how recently you were able to acquire it. I just wanted to open the space if you want to share that story, as you shared it with me privately, but I feel like it's really powerful because it's one of those hubs where a lot of this movement of consciousness is heading toward. So you leading the ship there is going to be an amazing experience and beneficial for all of us.
Yes, brother. Yeah, so the New Living Expo started out from, I go back to the 60s, basically. There was the hippie movement out in California, and that was in like the 60s. And in the 70s, the hippie movement then came into the Whole Life magazine. The Whole Life magazine then morphed into the Whole Life Expo in 1982, 1983. So it was all really started 20 years earlier with all the hippie movements and all the gurus and the spiritual people coming from India to the Bay Area, San Francisco area. And then the Whole Life Expo continued until about 2001. So it was long lasting. It was the first spiritual expo in the world. And in 2001, the owner of the Whole Life Expo changed the name to the New Living Expo. And then that continued for 23 years. And then 23 years later was last year, 22 years later, I was a speaker at the event, and I heard it was for sale. And I actually, when I first started Portal to Ascension, I would be vending Tibetan bowls at the event. That's how I made the money, bro. I made the money for Portal to Ascension by hustling Tibetan bowls from India, from my cousin from India, at these expos. And so I had a deep connection. I'm like, dude, this is freaking, I want to buy this thing, And after, a lot of back and forth and negotiations and everything, I took it over. And it's been so much work, man. Thousands of hours, thousands of hours for multiple people in the last 8-9 months. We're almost there now. After this is going to be playing around that time that is actually happening. And I wanted originally to take it over in 2027 because I feel there's going to be a mass contact experience where everyone's going to know we're not alone, like open contact in 2027. But then when I was told by the past owner that he wants to sell it now, I realized, well, this is an opportunity for me to kind of work out the kinks, see what works, what doesn't work this first year. But I'm really setting it open for a contact center for 2027. Because especially where it's at, dude, when you come there, you'll see, oh my God, beautiful rolling hills everywhere, night sky, dark night sky. So, when I had the download for Portal to Ascension in 2008, one of my downloads was I was going to eventually create contact centers. Well, I thought they were going to be landing docks at first, but now I realize it might be meditation centers, places where people come with collective intentions, meditate, communicate with the galactic community. So having this event that historically gets 2,000 to 3,000 people there, it's a great opportunity to bring the masses together and to really do some work. Because as you know, when we gather in numbers and we gather in numbers with a collective intention, the shift is really powerful and tangible at that time. So I'm just excited to see where it's going to go. I'm putting in all my love and my energy into this, 100% all in, without any expectations, and let's see what the future holds for us.
It feels like both being part of a legacy and being part of the future. And so I'm really excited to be a part of it and support you in any way that I can, brother. We end every episode with this segment called the Final Trio, which are just short questions that we ask at the end. The first one I had for you is, if you could speak directly to the version of Neil at 18, the one who was just discovering the parallels between Krishna and Yeshua, what would you like to say to him?
Oh my God. It's actually kind of simple, like strap on your seatbelt. Because back then I had no idea how all this connected. What does sound healing have to do with Yeshua? What does sound healing have to do with my fascination with UFOs? What does psychedelics have to do with ancient civilizations, right? And I wouldn't really want to say anything to shift my reality, but maybe what I would say is it's all connected. It's all connected.
What is the question you most wish someone would ask you
right now?
Right now.
I would say, I was thinking like, it's like, just how are you, I guess? No, I'm just kidding. The question I would want somebody to ask me, you do a good job asking questions.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. I would say, what is darkness and what is evil? That is one. And I have to jump because I have another call in a second, but I can leave you with my analogy on this if you want.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So I was in Vipassana and in Bali like a year ago, and as I'm there in the experience, I'm closing my eyes, and after a few days, I start having visuals, and it's all about not having a craving for the visuals, and it's not about imagining things. You really have to just be still, observe the sensations, not try to project anything. And I'd always been told, this phrase that people say often, that the light is so strong, that the light is so powerful, that in a dark room, you put on one piece of light, the darkness runs away from it, right? I used to even say the darkness is working for the light. It used to be my phrase. Now I say they work together. I don't think they're working separately. And then so I'm in meditation, closing my eyes, and all of a sudden, I see a dark room. And then this is crazy, bro. 6 days deep into it, 8 hours of meditation a day, 6 days, and I'm like mastering this like Vipassana right now, right? And breathing. And somebody walks into that dark room, flips on a light. I see this darkness retreat, run. And then it goes into the corner of the room, and it's an apparition of a child. Black apparition. No facial features, nothing. Just darkness. In the corner, quivering from the light. And in that moment, what I'd always felt got solidified even more. The darkness doesn't run away from the light because it's like fear, that, you know, it's something separate. The darkness is a wounded aspect of creation that needs to reconcile and become part of the light again. It fragmented from the light so long ago, so much. It's so hurt. It's so wounded. It doesn't recognize itself in the light anymore. It's a wounded child. And if we see the darkness as that, if we see the crimes against humanity as that, if we see the atrocities as that, we hold them accountable, of course, for the crimes that have happened. But if we see them as a wounded part of creation that needs to be rehabilitated rather than punished, I feel that is the way that we can stop seeing people as the other, but start seeing each other as brothers and sisters.
Powerful way to end it, brother. Thank you so much for all the work that you do. I can't wait to see you again in person.
Me too, brother.
And continue co-weaving together. Much love.
Same to you.